Have you ever wondered how to get gorgeous, well-lit photos of a beautiful space like this one right here? Well, today we're going to go over my tips on how to do just that. For 6 years, I've been taking photos of real estate, interior design, and remodeling companies. Obviously, it differs widely from portrait photography, but to me, the goal is pretty similar. My goal is to capture spaces, not just how they look, but how they feel. I want to get them as natural looking and realistic as possible. So we're gonna talk about how I photographed this specific living room and achieved just that. So my client actually designed the living room for her personal home that we're going to see today, which is really cool because a lot of times you see what people do for other people's spaces. So getting to see what she chose to do in her own space was kind of a treat. Sort of like getting to see what a wedding photographer does for their own wedding photography. Except not, because they can't photograph their own weddings. Before we talk about how I photographed this space though, I want to talk about my gear besties for every interior design and real estate shoot that I do. Everything you see in this video was photographed on my Canon EOS R6 with a 24-105mm lens. My camera was kept on a tripod the whole time, and my favorite tripod for 7+ years has been my trusty Manfrotto 055 with a ball head mount. It's heavy duty and it provides the proper stability for these types of photos. It has a couple battle scars, but still gets the job done better than any tripod I've ever owned. When needed, I also bring this bad boy to control light. Now that you know what gear I used, let's talk about my process. The very first thing I do is turn off the lights. Too game showy? I don't think so. My goal is to have one color temperature in every room. Since natural light has a different color temperature and is cooler than most artificial light, I'll turn off all of the artificial light, even those in adjacent rooms, to prevent any spillover. Then I open as many blinds and curtains as I can to let in as much natural light as possible. And in the case of this space, they didn't have any blinds or curtains, so I didn't have to worry about that. Once I have my camera set up on a tripod, then I will set the camera settings on my camera. I'll always set my camera to f-stop 8.0, my ISO probably about 400, and then my shutter speed will then determine the overall exposure of the photo. Typically, because I'm shooting in lower light settings and I have a high f-stop, I do end up having a pretty slow shutter speed, which is why I always use a tripod. The reason that I do a slow shutter speed instead of a high ISO is because higher ISO means more grain, and so to have as little grain as possible and as much light, I'll shoot at that lower shutter speed. My camera is normally placed at about chest height, and in an ideal world, I would back up as far as possible to take my photos and then zoom in. The reason I like to zoom in is because of compression, which means the things in the background kind of get closer looking to the things in the foreground, and it makes things look a lot more proportionate and a lot less distorted. Okay, now that we've laid some groundwork, let's talk about how I photographed this space. The main photos I'm aiming are 1, overalls, like the whole room, not the clothing. 2, details/vignettes. And 3, multiple viewpoints. I always start with getting an overall of the room so that I know my client will have a picture showing the room as a whole, and then I will assess and get other angles or other details as needed within the space. I'll typically pivot around the room, so I'll start in one spot, get an overall, grab details there, pivot to another angle, get an overall, grab details there, and so on and so forth. So once I'm finished doing that, I will typically go back through the room and just see if there's any additional details I would like to get, and also it allows me to get more content for my client because, let's be honest, most of these shoots are for the gram, so the more content, the merrier, right? So the process is pretty straightforward and it is easy to replicate. I think that the hardest thing to get the hang of is composition and camera placement, but thankfully, with any other type of photography, this also applies. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. For me, this type of work is very rewarding, with the only drawback being that should I ever remodel my home, my standards are very high. Hopefully you enjoyed this video explaining my process and how I photograph interior design. By the way, all the Gear Besties mentioned in this video are available for purchase in my Amazon storefront, which is linked in the description below. Meanwhile, I hope you go take some pics and have a good time. And if you're not here to take pics, then take a nap. Okay.